Hello and welcome everybody. We are live. Welcome to Canonn Radio. This is the podcast that nearly never was, thanks to some technical problems, but thank you for joining us and keeping with us. We are here now. So, first of all, as I'm sure you heard the rather awesome song we had at the beginning, I must thank, well, too many to thank really, but many of the Canonn crew for helping with that video. I put the pictures together, but all the images and the videos are supplied by various commanders. So thank you very much for the time and effort there. That was awesome. So we've got an excellent show for you guys today.
Not to mention the song itself, Cal.
The
song is fucking amazing.
The song's quite good. Yeah, it's all right, you know. But but yeah, awesome song. And yes, I have just noticed that I thought I fixed the spelling mistake on the end of the song, which was pointed out to me earlier today. And it's still there, even though I thought I'd fixed it. So I don't know. Gremlins today have been all over the shop, but whatever. Anyway, we have a fantastic show. We have a rather large lineup of people to join us today. So without further ado, let's introduce them to you now. So first of all, we have the inexorable Larzok, that of the feline personality. Good evening, Mr. Larzok. How are you doing today?
Oh, not too bad.
Good.
How's everyone?
We have Sovereign Winter. I think he is the chief note taker. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Chief note taker extraordinaire.
We've also got, what's that guy's name again? Oh, yeah. Pangolin Wrangling. He's got some sort of obsession with putting propellers on belugas.
It'll work one day. Promise.
And of course, we have the esteemed Professor Xenobiologist extraordinaire, Mr. Crimshadow. Crimshaw? I think I'm getting a bit confused there. My apologies. How is it going today, sir?
That's okay. Crimshadow, yeah. Happy to be here.
I'm glad you are, because I'm losing it. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us today. Hopefully the rest of the show will go as expected. So perfect, of course. So it's been a very busy week in the galaxy, as I'm sure you're aware. There's been a few odd goings on. Gentlemen, if you'd like to just take some time to explain the most prominent aspects of the last couple of weeks. Larzok, how have you found it so far? How have you found the strange goings on with, like, you know, the Thargoids and the Empire and Civil War and the end of the galaxy as we know it?
Sounds like another day in 3306 to me.
Well,
it is.
that's one bit, isn't it?
It's been an
been a year.
time. Yeah, it's been an interesting year. I do think that was definitely the biggest thing for me was, you know, the whole Empire cracking down using, you know, the terrorist actions as an excuse to seemingly crack down on the Marlinist faction, who, you know, didn't really seem to be an issue before, and now with them going across the Imperial federal border, it seems that there's just going to be a little bit more trouble stirred up than I think most of us expected.
Yeah, they didn't just come. It wasn't just a crackdown on the Marlinists. They came down on them hard.
Yeah.
I mean, full-scale retreat.
Yeah, that's certainly seems pretty in line with what we've seen from the Empire, you know, up till now.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime there's been a splinter group or a faction that didn't want to toe the line, it's been a pretty hard line response usually from the Empire as a whole.
Yeah. I am definitely curious to see how Marlinists fleeing their jurisdiction will will affect, I guess,
Well,
the niceties between factions.
when the Federation isn't far enough to run, we will gladly welcome more settlers in Colonia.
And they might be heading out that way. I know even the Alliance has opened their arms to these refugees.
Yeah. While I doubt a lot of Marlinists are going to wind up in Colonia, they may get pulled into it in some way. But I think the big thing is going to be the Federation trying to stop Imperial jurisdiction at their borders. And I personally think they're going to have mixed luck with that.
Especially if they put their military arm. I mean, they were attacking megaships, they were attacking civilians. I mean, they want these Marlinists gone. There's no question about that. Are they willing to risk open war with the Federation?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely depends on what the Empire views as gone, right? I mean, is it do they really feel like this is a existential threat within the Empire? If these people are not in the Empire, are they not not a problem anymore?
Well,
No,
they straight up showed they don't give a shit about
Oh,
anyone
no.
else when they attacked Liz. Like,
No,
Yeah, they're going to hunt down what they perceive as this threat. I mean, already the Marlinists were basically on the fringe systems. Like they were barely within Empire control as it was.
I think I mean, something that I was thinking about is that this is the largest military movement we've seen in a long time, and I would say that
By far.
fact that
since
the fact that
before the invasion.
yeah, I mean the fact that the Empire moved that hard against what they were only calling a terrorist group, to say that like I don't think there's much doubt that they perceive that as almost an existential threat. The amount of force they brought down on Liz Rider and the Blue Mafia and the Marlinists.
Well, sure. I mean, you had people openly supporting the ideology of people who all but blew up 4 stations and assassinated a member of the royal family.
Yeah.
I mean, within a very short time frame, they showed that they not only had an ideology people agreed with, but clearly had resources at their disposal to make some pretty high profile attacks. I mean, I can definitely see where they're coming from as far as wanting to respond strongly to that type of incident.
I just think they're responding too quickly. They attacked Liz without really even figuring out exactly what was going on. I mean, we just learned that she was duped basically, and they just went
that's
after
what she claims, at least.
Well, according to her, I mean, how less could they have done, right? I mean, how do you? It's kind of hard to interrogate somebody without arresting them first, right? Like,
all right.
I think Petraeus is having a very knee-jerk reaction to his careful plans to worm his way into the Imperial bloodline. Like, the ruling bloodline is being very quickly undermined by this, let's all try democracy idea.
Oh, that's a thought.
I mean, the Federation is also a little, I wouldn't say as unstable as the Empire right now, but it certainly has some stuff going on with its higher ups, with the Starship One trial coming to I think it's finished now. Yeah, it's finished now.
Well, I think it's at least on hold for more information.
Yeah, it's at least it's on hold. They're not doing anything more with it at the moment, but I don't know as much about that. I've been more involved with fighting the Empire myself, so I haven't been paying attention.
I guess for those wondering about that, it was confirmed that Roy Repster is indeed guilty. For those that haven't been following that, he was going to be sentenced to death, and kind of scared him, and he claimed that he had some incentives, we'll say, from higher ups, and just recently we've learned who those higher ups were. That would be the fleet admiral himself. Lucius Vincent?
I think so. Which is, when you've got kill orders coming down from your fleet admirals, it certainly can't say anything good about your navy.
Oh, for sure. And then we need to figure out where it came from, because you can't imagine it just came from Vincent. You can't imagine he acted alone.
Yeah. You don't get a full-on sabotage job like that from a single guy, no matter how much they can pay.
Yeah. And if we're talking power struggles, Vincent is a very close friend of President Zachary Hudson. So what's that going to mean for the Federation? Could this be a power changeover? I still think we're a few years off from a Federation election, aren't we?
I think so. I can't remember election times off the top of my head, but
I feel like it is, but this could be a way to see Winters, the Shadow President, brought into power. We could just see a whole kind of new power shakeup. And if we're talking about these Marlinists, I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there. The Empire left the Federation for a reason. If these Marlinists don't want to stick around in the Federation, could we see the birth of a new superpower, something like a republic that's not any of the other factions that we know?
well, I mean, the Alliance is, as far as we know, semi-stable, and they do elections, don't they? I mean, that could definitely be an option for them if they want somewhere that is not killing off its higher ups and causing problems, to put it lightly.
I suppose it's true, yeah.
But
the Alliance has its own issues.
yeah, the Alliance
the
is
whole place
shady.
strikes me as
Corrupt.
It's too perfect.
corporatocracy, I guess.
Yeah,
like
it's
what
too
would
perfect.
would that be oligarchy, or I don't know, too many archies.
Oligarchy is ruled by the few. I don't think Alliance would fall under that. At least
Well, it's corporate ownership of reality is pretty much how the Alliance strikes me. You
Yeah.
know,
Okay,
the
so
Alliance.
where I was looking at the obviously I'm a follower Galnet as well. I'm not quite as keen up on the current political situation, seeing as I'm still thawing. I've still got a bit of frostbite. But looking at the way that things have turned out at the moment, my own question regarding this whole situation is where do the Thargoids come into all this? I mean, we know that the Marlinists have been got hold of these Thargoid based weaponry, and then the Thargoids seemingly attack the Witchhead Nebula for reasons that I'm not quite sure of yet. What does this have any link to what's going on with this issue with the Imperials and the Federation at the moment? Is there some sort of link between those, or is it a seemingly random event? What's all that about?
I personally don't think there's a connection. At least I can't. If there is, I can't see any.
If
yeah,
there is,
I certainly haven't seen any sort of evidence that there would be any link between the two.
al-
But
I also-
it does speak to the fact that clearly the NMLA had some resources at their disposal that they were able to get a hold of enough Thargoid caustic Thargoid material in order to make these dirty bombs. But yeah,
well,
that would be a long way to go. I mean, obviously, we don't know how the Thargoids work necessarily, how they would respond to a certain action, but the Witchhead would be a long way to go necessarily to get
Yeah.
Thargoid material when
when
there
it's
would be
available at our back door.
much more. So, but who knows that that the Thargoids would respond only to a local attack essentially.
Yeah.
I think we're focusing on the wrong actor. I mean, we know the Alliance has dealt with the Thargoids in the past. What if everything is so calm in their territory because they're the ones that are puppet mastering all this?
Maybe.
Suggesting that the Alliance is in control somehow of the Thargoids or influencing the Thargoids?
No. There's they're the ones that are down in the Witchhead. If we're going to say that's a far way to go, I don't know. wearing my tinfoil cap here, but
We like tinfoil here.
but just
What
trying
were
to think
you-
where they could have got that caustic material from.
Who controls the Witch Head Nebula?
I will say this: you don't need very serious contacts to get a hold of
Not really,
materials. Like I'm not saying I've got these things in my carrier right now, but I could.
What are you admitting
Well,
to
you,
there?
you know some people.
Yeah.
Thargoid resin is easy to get a hold of.
This is
We
true.
all know
This
where
is
to find
true.
it. That stuff has so many uses.
Biscuits.
And if you talk to the right person, hafnium isn't hard to get a hold of either.
Mm, yeah.
So,
I mean, they also
any fuck can put together a caustic bomb. Like, you don't need special skills.
Well, they did go to Liz.
I mean, yeah, they were given warheads that were modified by a incredibly skilled engineer. They didn't really need to procure the materials themselves. They were already going through someone who would have had full access to all of this stuff already.
I suppose.
I mean, they were going through like 3 people according to Liz to get to her, but at the same time, they were eventually the ones that got them, and I suppose it would not be hard at all to convert a missile to a bomb, considering it already has a bomb on the end of it.
Oh, that's a fair point.
Yep.
But yeah, there I don't I unless the Thargoids understand our political structure and our political squabbles, I don't think there's a connection between
Oh,
the
as far
Thargoids
as that goes, the witch head attack is more than likely just a change in barnacle season. They're right.
Yeah.
They're coming to
Oh
collect,
yeah. I
and
forgot
we've
about
got a pile of junk sitting in their systems where they're trying to farm. Like,
Yeah.
how would we feel if we had our agricultural systems just fucking torn straight up? Just because, like, they found something decent in the castings of some random microbe on the planet. It would be essentially the same thing. We've been stealing their crops for years. Like, what the
Yeah.
hell?
Yeah, I mean, and they were in this area too, as we know. This even earlier, I believe, just this year, we drove them back once before. I think the barnacle rotation seems most likely.
Not that I want to derail the whole conversation onto Thargoids, because obviously that's a whole different subject. But I guess it's fair to say then that, well, we didn't even think the Thargoids were even back at all until we started messing with their barnacles and the meta allies and all and that sort of thing. So I presume they responded just to what we were doing, and that's all it really been. Moving the conversation a little bit back to what we were discussing before, then. What do we think is going to be the? I can't say conclusion because I don't think anyone knows that yet. But what do you think might be the next course of action is going to happen in regards to the federal and imperial issues, should we say? Where is this all going to lead? Do you think what's next down the line? What do we think?
I can't see the Imperials just letting the Marlinists cross the federal border, and at the same time, I can't see the Federation just letting the Imperials basically blockade what is essentially free support for them. So I think we're gonna see some form of border skirmishes. There's going to be I think there's going to be a fight somewhere, at least, if not many fights, if not, in the worst case scenario, a full-on war.
Yeah, just having that many ships in close proximity.
Yeah.
We're not going to know who who's going to fire first, and I don't think history's really going to care. But one pilot, one accident, that's all it's going to take, and we could see some potentially very deadly consequences.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it doesn't come to that. I just got back to the bubble myself. I hate to be caught in the middle, but you never know with this. It's a powder keg right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, given
Is-
the instability in the Federation, I wouldn't be surprised if the Empire tried to, flex a little muscle, on what is effectively a border, and I don't think they'd be necessarily scared to get into a little bit of a border skirmish. I don't know that they'd necessarily want it to blow up bigger than that over this, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the Empire at least maybe tried some, more low key efforts to hit at some of the Marlinists rather than maybe rather than deploying a whole bunch of capital ships right at the beginning, might try some less overt methods. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the Empire went after him.
Yeah, along those lines, thinking about it with the whole, the higher ups in the Federal Navy were obviously not happy with the person whose drive they sabotaged. So maybe they aren't exactly happy with the federal administration at all. Maybe they're going to be the ones that, like, to go way out on a limb, maybe the Empire is going to basically buy off the Federal Navy.
I
They'll pay
I
to export Marlinists back, basically.
I know President Halsey was pretty separate from the Navy. Basically, let Vincent run it the way that he saw fit. But Hudson's definitely been a more, shall we say, militaristic leader than Halsey
Yeah.
was. I mean, he switched over Starship One to the frigate class. So I mean, it's definitely making a statement. I would be kind of surprised if you're trying to think of them instigating buying off the Federal Navy. If
Yeah.
I mean, he would just act aggressively at that. I think.
I would
Probably.
not at all be surprised to see a full federal split and Hudson just fuck off into the black with 3/4 of the federal military power and leave
That would be terrifying.
everyone else
Oh yeah.
holding the bag against a unified and pissed off empire.
Oh boy.
Could have another bubble for him.
Maybe
Just
you'll go
wanted
to
to go out to
Colonia.
Colonia.
Maybe he'll go take
Oh,
over Witchhead.
No way you want Hudson in Colonia. He can
Maybe
keep
you'll get him
on
in.
Yeah, with that
Colonia
many ships, you may not
somewhere
get a
else.
choice.
He can set up his own shack somewhere else.
Be blackjack and hookers.
Anyway,
Yeah, there's probably a split coming up in the Federation unless we find some good evidence that Vincent acted alone, or at least without the involvement of Hudson. I know Winters is definitely gunning for the job.
Yeah.
I think so. I must admit, the 3 years I was on ice was probably a good idea. Politics makes my head hurt. It always has done. I prefer science. Science is more fun. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. No one else knows what's going to happen. It sounds like it's going to be a bit of a turbulent time for everyone involved, though. Hopefully, I don't know, something might get resolved from all this with a slightly less, mind you, apart from Lars. Lars looks like his old bloodshed bit, don't you? But
I just didn't acknowledge it as a fact of reality. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't happen and that shady people aren't running around doing shady shit.
No.
Speaking as a shady person doing shady shit.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else that anybody wanted to cover on the weeks or the fortnight's news that we've been away?
I would just like to let everyone know that there is a major Caddis holiday coming up here on the 26th. It is official statement day. If you have anything you would like to officially state to the galaxy, that's the day.
All right, I'll keep
And
that
how
in
exactly
mind,
do we
I
go about
guess.
doing that then?
Oh, you just you header an open post to the Galnet forums titled "The Official Statement of Insert Name" and officially state something, and it's a good old time.
Stand up on the roof of your house and yell, "I'm ugly and I'm proud."
Well, you could do that if you want.
Well, the Reddit branch of Galnet is
Yes.
usually where this.
Yes, good old Reddit, been around for centuries. Okay. Well, I think we've probably exhausted the week's events so far. So I think now is probably a very good time to move our attentions to the more weirder side of the galaxy. Joining us today, we have a renowned xenobiologist, Commander Crimshadow. How are you going, sir? How is it going today?
Doing well, doing well.
Good stuff. Now, you've been out in the in the black looking for things that probably shouldn't exist. Is that a fair thing to say to begin with?
As far as things that shouldn't exist, I don't know if I'd agree with that, but I have been out in the black for a little while. Yeah, that'd be fair.
So, what is it you do? What give us a brief rundown of what it is that you're out there. What is it you're looking for, and what is it you do?
So I started probably a year ago doing a pretty thorough biology survey. I wanted to go out and really catalog as much as I could a lot of the weird and mysterious life that had been found, and really just try to determine, what can we learn about these things, with the tools we have available. So pretty much every region of space has something, um, and it really varies from your kind of space coral, as I would call it, where it's just kind of the leftover remnants of colonies of very very small organisms, all the way up to fully reactionary organisms, things that feed off of sunlight and or starlight, if you will, and will react to stimuli.
I have looked at some of your work, and I've been flying, through some part of the galaxy myself, and I've never come across anything like you found. I've looked at some of the illustrations and photos that you've produced, and I have to be honest, it's stunning. Um, there are, yeah, you got the more common varieties like the brain trees as they're known, and of course the barnacles that we are quite infamous these days. But I've seen other things like, well, I can't even describe half of them. Strange floating things with blue arms and a little eye sort of thing in the middle. And I don't know, floating mushrooms. I mean, how do you find this stuff? What is what's your game plan, as it were, when you reach a particular section of space? How do you decide how to look for things, and what gives you the idea of what you can find? Because I get the impression, looking at the data that you've got, that you have a kind of a procedure of how to find these things. So what is it you do? How do you go about doing that?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, I didn't find a lot of these things. Or as originally find them. So a lot of it is using the Pilots Federation Codex. Um, just looking through that region by region. I took a lot of time to really just go through everything and see what people had found. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't find any of them myself. I did first discover a few of them, but primarily it would be to go into a region and find and locate what people have already found. So go to those locations and see. Let's take a look at a Taurus mollusk, and go out there, look at these creatures, look at all the different varieties that are currently cataloged, and or that people have found, or there rumors of that have been found, and then start to see where have they been found, what are their traits, are they only found around B type stars with water in that system, whether that be a water world or a water giant or something like that, and then try to vary that a little bit. So instead of just going to the B type stars, I might try going to the F type stars or to the A type stars, and see if I can find something very close to that. So I'll try to find a B type star, with that water world, and hope that maybe there'd be a different variant in that area.
And have you found different variants? Is that something you have come across?
Yeah. So actually, the Taurus mollusk is the example that I use because I was lucky enough to find uh, a new variant. Um, I forget the exact name of the variant that I found, but um, but yeah, so normally though, I don't take any credit for being the first to discover most of these, by any means. It's mostly just going to what has been found and then really trying to do a lot of study of what we already know is out there.
And what's the most recent entity that you've looked at so recent? What is it? Is it something you found yourself, or is it something that you found in the codex and you've had more study on there? What's the most recent thing you've looked at?
So probably the most recent thing that I visited was the real mollusks. I did some publication on that. So I wanted to really go out and make sure that I was reporting correctly. They are, as the name would suggest, they kind of look like a reel, or kind of two mushroom caps put together on the stem. They kind of fall into what most of the other most of the other large mollusks look like. Some form of cap or bulb type end with. Now most of the other mollusks have kind of stalks of some sort on the end. The real mollusk being kind of the unique variety there. But yeah, the mollusk type life forms do seem to be all over our galaxy. I don't necessarily know that they are species related to each other. It's possible that they had simultaneous evolution, but they do seem almost too similar to not be related in some way.
Very true.
So have you other the other guys here, have you seen any of these mollusks? I've never seen anything. I think the only thing I've ever bumped into is one of those I forgot what they're called now. It's like a crystalline structure in space, like a pointy thing. That's all the best I can come up with.
Yeah, if I might actually.
Yeah.
Just speaking of finding these things, so when you find using your different scanners, when you find a notable stellar phenomena, what you're going to find is a Lagrange cloud of some sort. Now, if you are far enough away from a nebula or farther away from the galactic center, it's probably going to be a proto-Lagrange cloud. So it's just going to be kind of a dark, dirty ball of gas, if you will. If you get closer to a nebula, closer to the galactic center, you might find a more colored Lagrange cloud, or possibly a storm Lagrange cloud, which are a little more dangerous, but definitely worth a visit. But nevertheless, in a Lagrange cloud, you're generally going to find two of the larger coral type varieties. So those might be your metallic crystals, could be your ice crystals, could be your calcite plates. You're usually going to find two varieties there as far as varieties of those things. So you might find metallic crystals and mineral spheres. You might find two species of metallic crystals. And then you're going to find some, it does seem like every single one of them does have some sort of smaller movable life form, right? So these things are not as stationary. These are things that can, due to some stimulus, move in some way. Whether that be the larger umbrella mollusks or the smaller, like your bell mollusks, your Taurus mollusks.
And when you say stimulate, what exactly are we talking about? I mean, is there some way that you yourself can make them do something? I wouldn't recommend shooting at them, perhaps, but I'm going to guess you can do.
For sure. Sure. So normally I would start with non-destructive testing. So you'd kind of approach them, see if they are affected simply by your proximity. You might do something similar with your headlights. Seeing if they respond to light, because some of these mollusks do feed off of light, kind of using what we'd think of as photosynthesis. So some of them will turn towards you, just by having your headlights on. They'll turn towards you because they think that you're, that nearby star. However, obviously, some of them don't respond to that, and so destructive testing can be a little bit more, the order of the day. That we are here for science, so sometimes that does happen. But yeah, usually a small beam laser is enough to kind of get their attention. Sometimes they will run away from that, as you'd expect. But a lot of times they'll be pretty vocal about that. They do tend to also make noise when fired upon.
What noise? Fantastic. So
It's terrifying.
You just have to shoot it for science.
You have to shoot for science.
It may be the
It
last
is
of the
part of it.
test, but it's part of the test.
Make it scream. I mean, I've never had the luxury of. I am going to go out and have a look for this sort of stuff myself. I think because I can imagine it's fascinating to find these sort of things out there. So,
Stay away from the capsule mollusk.
and why is that then?
So I definitely, yeah, there are some very unique ones. So your bulb mollusk is one of the more visually impressive as far as when you get close to them or have your lights on them, depending on the variant, they will release a very large amount of spores. We don't really know what the use of those spores are, whether that be a distraction defense mechanism or whether that is some form of reproduction. But so those can be really impressive to watch. Your capsule mollusks, yes, are a little more dangerous. Make sure you have your shields on and make sure they're decent. The capsule mollusks do interact with one another, flying at each other and then having an electrical discharge. If you get close enough to them, it does seem like they will mistake you for one of their own kind, or simply, come at you as well, and that electrical discharge can do damage to your ship if you don't have your shields up.
Oh, there's no mistake. They hunt you. Those things are creepy. I have nightmares about capsule mollusks.
Does that mean we can have fights with these mollusks?
You can get as close to them as you want. I'm not going. You can say like, oh, they approach as you get near them, and they're jump. No. I've been hunting through Lagrange clouds by those things.
So it's important to remember there's really two main different sizes of mollusks. So your bell, your Taurus, they're pretty small. I would describe these mollusks as being about the size of a cargo container.
Yeah, they're cute.
They're pretty small. I almost wish that our cargo scoop was configured to accept them, but unfortunately they're not. When it comes to the larger varieties, they can be well around the size of an asp, or getting close to the size of an anaconda. They're not small, and collision with them can do significant damage.
So does that mean that they're heavy? They aren't just hollow. That they're that must
No,
mean they
I would
have some
I would
significant
expect
weight
that they
behind
are.
them.
Yeah, I would expect that they are solid entities.
And they're incredibly complex creatures. We see everything variation from bioluminescence to energy production. I mean, these aren't just simple creatures.
No, I mean we do have some capability with our current technology to do some sampling, and we do have quite a few different sample varieties, as far as the mollusk mycelium, mollusk spores. Even we've been able to collect some mollusk brain tissue.
You've collected mollusk brain tissue.
So they have
Yes.
brains.
I was about
Well,
to
I mean, so
suggest
we
that.
don't we can't say exactly how complex their brains are. I mean, this is but it is a
Just
collection of
suppose.
nerd tissue, sure.
Well, that's something I wasn't
Weird.
expecting because most of the life forms that I've heard about are they're just like they're obviously living, but having brain tissue would suggest a possible form of intelligence. Maybe I mean obviously not to the level that we are, but that's an interesting thought all by itself. I could talk about that for ages, but I should probably ask other questions, I imagine. So apart from the mollusks, what would you say is probably your favorite discovery that either you've come across yourself or that somebody else has found and you studied yourself? Is there anything that stands out out of everything else that you've seen in the galaxy?
Sure. So speaking specifically of mollusks, I actually think mollusks are probably my least favorite.
Oh,
Really, what we would classify as pods probably get far more interesting just because of they're much more varied. So you have the octahedral pods and their supporting void hearts. Those are very unique. The octahedral pods, named for their shape, have a very peculiar kind of interior bioluminescence, and getting close to them, their spores are actually corrosive, as long if you don't have shields up. So if you have shields up, your shields will kind of stop those spores from getting to your ship. But without it, those spores are similarly caustic as to what we would see from Thargoid technology.
I was going to say, because I'm looking at the description and the imagery that you got in your document that you provided to us, and that looks suspiciously Thargoid-like to me, I have to say.
It is interesting that so much, and it's not just this particular pod, but a lot of life seems to produce caustic effects. Humans might actually be the oddball out there.
Yeah, it could
Oh,
be
sure, yeah.
some
So
it could be some convergent, evolution towards. We weren't designed to live in space. Thargoids can seem to be just fine hanging out in space, as do all these pods and mollusks.
Well,
So
I mean, humans aren't exactly non-corrosive. We just
that's a
do
good
all
point.
of our chemical lifting internally.
Inside, yeah,
Oh,
we
fair,
don't
fair.
throw it at other.
That's probably a
people.
very good thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, add on to that, you do have some other life that does release some caustic. You have your gyre pods. Now they are very far away from one another. Your octahedral pods, the accompanying void hearts, which before I move away from the void hearts, if you have not seen a void heart cluster in the shadow of a planet, I would definitely recommend it. It is a beautiful scene. As void hearts do seem to have some form of bioluminescent. It almost seems as though the center of them is on fire. So they're generally found in rings around planets. So it's this ring of asteroids with these glowing orbs floating in space. It's truly beautiful to behold. But the gyre pods, and speaking of Thargoids, the relation, the gyre trees are peculiarly sized. It when first seeing the gyre tree, I was very much reminded of Thargoids, and it would almost seem as though a gyre tree would be a perfect foundation for growing the Thargoid interceptor ships that we see today.
Like as a lattice. I can see that.
Exactly, yeah, as kind of a dry dock in space, the same way that we use structures in order to construct and repair our ships. A gyre tree would be the perfect
I mean, that
dock
reminds
for a
me of,
Thargoid ship.
like the structures they used to use like back when we had just started printing organs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Just for the benefit
and
of
the
those listening to the podcast, just give a quick description of what a gyre tree actually looks like.
So I think your starting shape would be something like an old Earth carousel, right? So you have a central node with spokes coming out of it, and there's about a dozen of those. At the end of each spoke, it splits off into two, and at the end of those spokes is where you would find gyre pods, which I think really kind of helps cement that relationship, possible relationship between gyre tree and the Thargoids, and the fact that the gyre pods release spores that are shield penetrating, similar to what we see in Thargoid technology, of shield penetrating caustic attacks.
Yeah, the only potential downside or potential break, I should say, to that link is where they're found. They're found all the way out in the Xibala, forgive me if I'm pronouncing that wrong, or Kepler's crest sectors, which I don't think we found Thargoids out that far yet, which either means that they're more prevalent than we currently know, or it's just a coincidental link.
Sure, absolutely. It could be simultaneous evolution, kind of that sort of thing. And I might be reaching a little bit there. It is just a relationship that I've noticed.
Oh, for sure.
Although I will say, if you have not visited a kind of a gyre forest, since they are trees, a gyre forest is a true sight to behold. They are very large. The gyre trees themselves being probably about in diameter, you're talking the length of two anacondas, and so seeing dozens of them all spinning in space is truly impressive.
Oh, they spin as well. That
They do.
sounds good. Well, I mean, like I said earlier, I would very much like to go and visit some of these creatures, I think, just to see for myself. What advice would you give to a budding novice who wants to go exploring this sort of thing, is there a particular location that you know of that will have maybe not the Gaia trees themselves, but other interesting things for us to look at? Is there somewhere nearby that we could easily find?
Sure. So when trying to pick out something that especially someone who's new to exploration, who's really just getting started, look for the collared pods in the Pilots Federation Codex. Most people do travel a distance out as part of their engineering process, and the collared pods are right at that distance threshold. So they're a real good destination to just kind of hey, I'm going to be going out a distance anyway. I might as well stop at something. They're really good to stop at. Um, the colored pods might not be the most exciting space life form. They don't they're not caustic. They don't attack you or anything like that. But it's a great way to see some different colorful Lagrange clouds and some different space life forms.
I think I prefer not being attacked, if I'm honest. Uh, I like to play it safe. So obviously, there's not just space-dwelling creatures that are abound in the galaxy. There's also flora that you find on the planet's surface as well. What can you tell us about some of the more unusual things that grow on planet surfaces?
Sure. So starting kind of in the more common side, you'd have bark mounts are found in almost every nebula, um, in the galaxy that we've really done a lot of looking around at. They are pretty ubiquitous. It doesn't really track as to how they've gotten to all these different locations. How kind of some similar species has gotten there. But bark mounds are probably the most common. Um, there is a rather interesting correlation between your brain trees and guardian structures that we've found.
Oh,
Um, we don't really have a good explanation as to why, but they are definitely correlated. Anywhere that we have found brain trees, we have found guardian structures.
right.
The original brain trees were found almost exclusively inside ejecta craters on planets near near being a relative sense, near these guardian structures. Um, However, we have found other variants in other locations now, as far as being not inside these craters. But we don't really have a definite say that the guardians maybe planted these life forms, or purposefully put these life forms here. But they do seem very oddly connected.
And I would think that the fact that they're injected crater, that could almost hint that they like some kind of orbital seeding.
Yeah, it definitely does raise some very curious questions as to why they would be found there so often. I mean, it is peculiar, maybe that would be the method, but because that is such a destructive method. But it's possible that maybe they were launching them from systems away, um, given the long reach of the brain trees from the guardian sites. I mean, sometimes hundreds of light years away. um, it is definitely curious.
Yeah, and I think my personal favorite in terms of the life that you can find on the bodies are these anemone. You can get some of these bioluminescent ones that I think make for some great viewing, especially if you're on the dark side of a planet.
Absolutely, lots of different colors, lots of different shapes to them. I know originally there were some that referred to them as kind of space pumpkins and that sort of thing, but they're definitely very, very beautiful, um, and found in a lot of different varieties. Again, at times all over the galaxy at large.
They're one of the few types of space life that I've seen. I went and looked at them a long time before all of our ships got the FSS updated. So I didn't know they had a proper name at that point, but they are very
Now,
pretty.
I
Yeah.
have a question for you, Krim, as I'm sure everyone knows bark mounts. are the bane of the biologist's existence. Why do you feel they are all over the place? Like, are they the proto life in the galaxy? Do bark mounds control the galaxy, Crim?
While I certainly would never suggest that bark mounds are, the progenitor of all life, they do seem responsible for probably more total life than anything else. So it may be worth keeping an eye on them.
I don't trust them. I don't
They may
trust
be
them.
coming for us, and they are the dominant species in the galaxy, at least by weight.
I guess I'll say though, it is interesting that yes, we all love the bark mounds in our own special ways, but there does seem to be, with at least what we found so far, it's a convergent evolution. Anemones are pretty to look at, so no one really says anything, but you might find different colors on different worlds, but they're still located all over the galaxy, and such similarity between them, you can't help but think that there must be either something seeding these creatures, and not just the anemones, of course, all the life, but there's something seeding or some kind of convergent evolution going on. Maybe bark mounds are just the pinnacle species.
Or
Maybe-
you think bark mounds are the perfect creature? Like,
They're the
and Darwin everywhere just decide, yep, bark mound, way to go. This is it. We've got it. Nothing needs further done.
Life loves simple.
Life finds a way.
They
Hey.
do seem to be able to
Gee.
survive in
That's depressing.
almost any
That is-
system.
That is
I-
depressing.
I was gonna suggest something slightly different. I was gonna say maybe bark mounds and anemones are maybe some form of egg or reproductive cycle for the mollusks and stuff that we find all over the place.
That is
I
a
don't know if there's-
long gestation period.
I don't know if there's any locational similarities to suggest that, but
Astrological time.
yeah,
you
we don't.
know,
These things could be
astronomical.
these things could be millennia old. We don't know how long their gestation period is.
Maybe they're,
Yeah,
But
they're waiting.
it's entirely possible that what we see of the bark mounds is the remains of when these species, reproduce. So the bark mounds may simply be the leftover biological material from when some of these life forms, grew and
The
then left
withered,
to space.
blown out core.
I would
I-
be happy if that was the case, because yes, bark
I would
mounds
personally
and finding
love
bark
to see
mounds
a-
is just terrible.
I would love to see a mollusk fire off the surface of a planet. That would be cool.
I mean, we
I
do
want to
have
know
to
how they get into space.
we do have to consider that, yeah, for as much as we think we know, there's still so much left that we don't. I mean, we've probably found less than 10,000 unique members of each individual species, except for bark mounds, of course. And who knows? There could be migrational patterns. There could be what we think are two individual species, such as the parasol and real mollusk. For all we know, the real mollusk is just the final life stage of a parasol mollusk. We don't really know. We haven't been looking at these creatures long enough in terms of the lifespan of we don't even know what their lifespan is. It could be millennia. We just are looking at a snapshot in time of these creatures.
Well, that leads me on to the next question I was going to ask anyway. Excuse me. What is there any evidence of things you haven't found yet? I mean, like I say, I don't know all the signs and all the science that you use to discover and to to look up these creatures. I know the pilot's codex is very helpful, but as you've said yourself, you have found species yourself and you've come across them. But have you looked, for example, in only specific parts of the galaxy, or have you travelled across the width and breadth of the whole of the system, or is there any other things to be found that you think that you've got a tantalising glimpse of what might be out there, or is everything still completely unknown to you at this point?
Sure. I think we're definitely operating off of very little information overall. You have a couple things that are definite mysteries, as well as some things that I would say kind of lead us to thinking that there might be other things. So, first, I would say probably the relationship between the peduncle pod and the chalice pod. So these are two pods that are found, if I will, when we're looking at the kind of the map of our galaxy. If we put ourselves, kind of on the southern direction, to the galactic center, the chalice pods and peduncle pods are found kind of in the northeast of that circle, right? They're both pretty similar in construction and what they look like, but the peduncle pods are found, very commonly around their tree, the peduncle tree, whereas the chalice pods have only been found on their own. We have never found a chalice tree, which has led a lot of people to think there must be a chalice tree out there, given their similar construction. So there is some belief, that there's probably a chalice tree out there. There are a few other pods. The rhizome pod is not really believed to have a tree. The quadripartite pod, we don't really know. We've never found a tree, but it's not entirely impossible that one does exist. Again, also looking at that kind of that compass view of the galaxy map, almost nothing has been found on the western side of the galaxy.
Interesting.
Everything else has been found, in the center or on that east side.
Interesting.
Why do you think
with
that
the-
is? Is there a
I
reason?
don't really know.
No.
Yeah, the west side is heavily trafficked too. If stuff was
I
there,
was
you think
gonna
we'd
say-
find it.
Colonia is on the west side, isn't it?
It is to a degree. Looking at that entire western half, if you will, there's Colonia, there's the Taurus mollusks, which are kind of close to that center line, being in Temple, I believe, and then there is the Stolon pod, which if you really want to take a trip, you can go out to the Stolon pod and the Stolon tree. I can talk about that one in a second if you like, but but other than that, the western side is almost entirely devoid of anything that people have found. But yeah, so the Stolon pod and the Stolon tree are they are my mystery. They are my bane. I've taken 2 trips out there, which they are excessive. So starting with the Stolon pod, they're the only pod that we've found that has multiple states. So the Stolon pod seems to have kind of this pearl inside and a very like walnut shape exterior that kind of holds the pearl. So we find the walnut shape in a closed around the pearl formation, open, showing the pearl off, and then we find the pearl separate from the walnut shell. But we don't really know why that is the case. What role does that play in the Stolon, life cycle? And then the Stolon tree itself is probably the most nightmare-inducing life form I have found. It is a kind of twisted, bulbous mass of limbs reaching out in every direction. Some of those limbs at the end of those limbs is where the Stolon pod grows. So sometimes you'll find Stolon pods at the end of those limbs. Sometimes you'll find an empty limb where we can assume that a Stolon pod has left. The interior that this forms out of is kind of a rocky, flesh-like mass. And then probably the thing that bothers me the most, there is some form of fibrous, almost spider silk-like growth that you'll find in between the tree arms. I don't know really what to make of that. I don't know if there is some other life form that coexists in the Stolon tree that is producing that, or if this is just kind of leftover, similar to the tasseling of corn that we would see as it grows. Is this just leftover mass as this tree grows out? I don't know.
Are you suggesting space spiders? Space spiders.
I don't want to suggest space spiders. I'll be honest with you. That would make me very sad. But
Sad.
But yes, so all terrified maybe would be another word.
Maybe the pearl is just a giant spider
It's a
egg.
big egg.
No.
It's going to burst
so
at any moment.
That pearl is very large. That pearl is the size of a Type 10. If that is the egg
It's a Thargoid egg
of a spider, I can't imagine how terrifying that would be.
Well,
but the other part of that is that almost all of these space life forms have some form of reaction to stimuli, right? That we record as traits.
Mhm.
And I've taken 2 trips out to the Stolon pod because I really wanted to find a trait, whether it responded to proximity or lights or weapons fire or and I have tried every weapon I can think of. I have tried every damage type, whether that be kinetic weapons, explosive weapons, energy weapons, enzyme missiles, headlights, chaff, heat sinks, anything that I can find. And I've gotten no response from the Stolon in any way, shape, or form. So I think there is a mystery there. I think I want to believe that the Stolon will react to us in some way. I don't know what that's going to look like.
It's gonna hatch and crawl over your ship.
No.
No, wait.
No.
Well, actually, thinking about it, spiders most of the time when they hatch, they become thousands of little spiders. So maybe
No,
when
no,
that hatches,
no,
there'll
no.
be tons of little tiny spiders. They'll crawl through your thrusters and into your ship.
Tritium might be carrier fuel, but you're giving me a nightmare fuel.
It's like don't let this become your white whale. You know, like sometimes a tree is just a tree,
with spider webs.
and it, yeah, and it's not gonna talk to you because you don't. No matter what you do, you're not speaking tree.
Yeah.
That's true. I don't have a third trip out there scheduled any time. I will probably leave any further discoveries to other people. I have posted my notes, and I think that's probably as far as I'll go with them.
And
unless something is found.
I should also mention, of course, that these notes, you can, of course, find these notes and read them for yourself. Just check out the Canonn official channels. You know, the archives, they'll be there somewhere. They do make interesting reading, especially when you find a jellyfish. Please tell us about the jellyfish.
The jellyfish, which you'll have to narrow that
they
down.
They
for
look
me
like
a little
jellyfish. They where's the name of them? I'm just trying to look through it myself. Actually, I've forgotten now.
Must be one of the mollusks, right?
Was that a mollusk?
I would think or you don't mean the astropod, do you? They have some interesting appendages coming off of them.
Could be that, actually. I like the squid mollusk. That's a very cool looking creature as well. But yes, maybe it was the parasol mollusk I was looking at, actually. There's quite a few that look like jellyfish, to be honest. They all have a similar look to them, actually. I know you mentioned the capsule mollusks before. They're the ones that you don't want to go near. But
I want to go near them now.
No, they're going to kill you. No, I'd
exactly.
If you have some decent shields, the capsule mollusks won't necessarily kill you quickly, but
I
you don't want to stay
just
around
slowly.
I want to go wrestle with the aliens.
They will hunt your soul.
Let me go punch
real
the
quick,
aliens.
What are your thoughts on the anomalies? I've run into one or two of them. Ones I've met have been fairly boring colored lights. What do you think these things are alive? Do they categorize them? Should we categorize them as life or what?
So they're definitely some form of life. I've probably visited about a dozen of them. Through the Pilots Federation Codex, we've probably found 2-3 dozen. Of the ones I've visited, they've been incredibly varied. Possibly more varied in actions and responses than some of the life forms we've found, as far as the biological life forms. Many of them do respond, and many of them respond aggressively. Some of them do drain shields, cause significant interference with ship systems. Some of them release rather destructive shockwaves, of a thermal variety. So the shockwaves will both damage shields, possibly damage hull if your shields are down, as well as heat your ship up. So, yeah, anomalies I would argue are maybe a little more dangerous than a lot of the life forms. But anomalies are far less prevalent. You know, I referenced the peduncle trees and peduncle pods. Those cover 1,000 light years, and there are probably hundreds of Lagrange clouds containing peduncle life forms. Most of the anomalies that have been found in single systems and have not been found in more than one place. So the anomalies are very rare and very unique.
They're definitely life not as we know it. If you look at an enemy or a mollusk, it looks like stuff that we're used to. These things are just something else.
Could they be like, I guess maybe not necessarily microscopic, but just smaller than our sensors at least can really get a
Just
good look
not
at?
a form of cellular life.
Like,
what
could they be like a
are
colony?
the anomalies Halsey's aliens?
Maybe.
Could they be?
Ooh.
Like,
I
could they
didn't think
be
about that.
if there's a whole classification of let's call these things energy life, like energetic based life, do they have classifications of their own? Like, that thing's just a stupid animal, that's barely a rock, that's like a human. Like, is there a categorization of the kingdom? Say, I don't know.
I think
I mean,
could be-
there isn't currently, but I think it's something we're probably going to have to make, given that these things have been found, and we've started to make more knowledge about them known. It's something we'll have to do.
And just due to the limitations of our FSDs, we're really only visiting star systems. The galaxy is mostly empty space. Who knows what's in between the stars that we can't even see?
Space whales.
Space whales.
Yeah, you never know. It's a wishful thinking, I think. So I think what I'd like to do in closing is to ask the obvious question: is it worth people going to check out this stuff? Is it something that is, obviously it's good to look at this stuff, it's fun to look for things and see it for yourself, but when it comes to exploring the galaxy like you do, what is there a scientific benefit to doing this? Is it something that you would encourage others to do, given the amount of time and effort it can take to look into these? Obviously people will go and look at the things that people have found already. They can use the pilot's codex to check that out for themselves, but to find something new to explore and to look for something, I imagine that is not something that happens every day. So do you, I'm going to presume you of course think it's worth the perseverance, but would you encourage others to come along and join the ride, as it were, and look for it themselves?
So it is very much a personal motivation, sort of thing. I do not spend as much of my time just trying to see if I can find the unknown. That this was a significant time investment just to visit everything that was known. So to ask someone individually to go out there and do the legwork, that has to be something they want to do, and me asking them or wanting them to do it is not going to change whether they are going to do it in the first place. But I think that's the only way we learn is to explore and go out there and look. I put in the effort simply to go out there and kind of look in detail and really try to catalog everything we know about what we know. But I certainly can't argue against someone going out there to help us increase what it is that we know about.
And you believe there is more to find?
I certainly believe that there are more variants of some of the things that we have found. Um, I think most recently there was a new variant of the Taurus mollusk found that I have not visited. So I do think there are more varieties, and I hope there are. I hope we have not found everything there is to find.
Commander Crimshadow, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you about this. I mean, I personally am very interested in this sort of thing, but I've never had the time or the option to go out and explore myself. So it's been an absolute pleasure for you to bring this sort of information back home to us so we can read it all. Thank you very much for your time today.
Absolutely, and if I could, kind of continue your question in a second manner.
Please.
There are people who are making trips to certain places. Whether that be someone saying, hey, I want to go out and go to Sagae, or hey, I want to go to Colonia. There are interesting things along the way. You can only add maybe 1,000 or 2 light years to a 22,000 light year trip, and see something very cool along the way. I think that makes traveling significantly better.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, I believe we have probably reached the end of today's podcast. I'm pretty sure we've covered pretty much everything there is to cover today. Is there anything you gentlemen wanted to add before we leave?
No, I'm good. Just
That'd be a no
thank
then.
Crimshadow again.
I can't think of anything.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure. Once again, thank you, Commander Crimshadow, for joining us today. Please feel free to come back any time, because the stuff you can tell us will probably boggle our minds. Next time on the show, I suspect we'll be discussing those wonderful friends of ours, the Thargoids, in more detail. What they are, where they come from. No idea how we're going to do that yet, but I'm sure we'll be able to figure out something. In the meantime, thank you very much for joining us today. We will be back, I don't know when, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, so do look out for that. And as always, there will be a pre-show podcast where we discuss things that may not make any sense now, but they will do if you listen to it. Other than that, yeah.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.